The smoke cleared, but the shadow remained. Evelyn Pierce Granger, no longer the fragile bride from Cincinnati, stood on the porch, her small frame now a silhouette of defiance against the harsh Kansas sky. The morning after the final, bloody confrontation with the railroad men, the air was still acrid, smelling of burnt pine and gunpowder. 3 bodies, hastily covered, lay near the smoldering ruins of the feed shed, a grim trophy of their victory. Eli Granger stood nearby, his bandaged shoulder a stark white against the dark fabric of his shirt, his face etched with a mix of weary exhaustion and a terrible, cold satisfaction. "They'll come again," she repeated, her voice steady despite the raw fear still clinging to the lining of her memory. She didn't ask a question. It was a statement of fact, the first rule of life on the frontier. The threat never truly dies, it just rides away for a time. Eli didn't bother to look up from the revolver he was methodically cleaning. "I know, but they'll wait for the law now. They'll try to use the courts, the government. The easy way, the fire and the hired gun, didn't work. They'll escalate to the slow, suffocating kind of warfare. The easy way for them is the slow strangulation for us," Evelyn countered, stepping down the porch steps, the mud sucking at her boots. She walked to the remaining fence line, tracing the scorch marks with her boot tip. "We can't just defend the ranch, Eli. We have to defend the valley. One ranch alone they can isolate. 10 ranches, standing together, that's a community. That's a fortress." He finally raised his head, his gray eyes, which she had come to know as the window to his internal storms, reflecting her own determined gaze. "You want me to ask for help? I don't beg, Evelyn. They hate the railroad, but they're terrified of me. They'll take the money and leave me hanging." "You don't beg, you lead," she corrected, walking toward him, forcing him to meet her eyes. "You fought for us. Now, let us fight for them. Every rancher out here fears the Redstone Pacific, but they fear being alone more. You are the man who fought back and survived. You are the rallying point, whether you want to be or not." His jaw tightened, that stubborn monolithic line she knew so well. "They're afraid of me. They see the bodies." "Good," Evelyn said, her voice dropping low and intense. "Fear is a powerful tool, but right now, it's keeping them silent. Show them what to be loyal to, Eli. Show them what to fight for, not what to fear." She reached out, placing her small, soot-stained hand on his massive calloused one, resting on the rifle stock. "You saved my life. Now, let me save your soul. Don't carry this burden alone. Let this be the last time you fight a storm by yourself." If you've ever felt the profound burden of responsibility for an entire community and known that your fight wasn't just for yourself, leave an "I understand" in the comments below. Your resolve can become the strength for many. That afternoon, she sat at the heavy oak table, the same one where their unromantic marriage vows were spoken, and began to write. Not a desperate plea, but a clear, concise declaration. She wrote to every known rancher in the valley, from the old, wary Bo Carter down the road to the newer settlers near the river. The letters were signed Evelyn Pierce Granger, and they were not gentle. To the freeholders of the Redstone Valley, the Redstone Pacific Railroad came to Granger Ranch with fire and gun smoke. They left with 3 dead men and a promise to return. They are not offering progress, they are offering ruin, and they will not stop until every free acre is theirs. We defended our home, but the truth is simple. One lone house is a target. A valley united is an army. The time for whispering is over. If your land, your livelihood, and your freedom mean anything to you, stand with us. Come to Granger Ranch. Bring what you can, not just rifles, but tools, food, and courage. We fight together, or we fall alone. Choose now, before the choice is made for you. Your neighbor and ally, Evelyn Pierce Granger. Eli watched her, saying nothing. His silence was not disapproval, but a deep, meditative awe. When she finished, she looked up, her expression tired but resolute. "You have the strength of 100 men, Eli. I have a pen and the desperation of a woman who knows what it means to lose everything. Together, we are unstoppable." The response was tentative at first. Neighbors, scarred by previous skirmishes and broken promises, arrived one by one, their wagons carrying skepticism and fear alongside their sacks of grain. But when they saw the burnt earth, the freshly turned graves, and the unyielding stature of Eli Granger, who was still taller than any man has the right to be, something shifted. He didn't make a speech. He didn't have to. When Jedediah Shaw, the rancher whose property bordered theirs to the south, a man known for his calm, quiet wisdom, asked what the plan was, Eli simply pointed to a half-burnt section of fence. We rebuild that, double high. We share patrols. We set up signals. You keep your cattle on your land, I'll keep mine. If a wagon shows up with a writ, we meet them with numbers. They want to scare us. We scare them back. Only difference is, we're defending what's ours. It was the simplicity, the brutal, honest practicality of it that won them over. Eli wasn't asking them to die for him. He was showing them how to live for themselves. He worked alongside them, his wounded shoulder ignored, lifting timbers and hammering nails with the same precise, unspent strength he'd always possessed. The collective effort birthed the Free Valley Defense League, and Evelyn became its indispensable core. She managed supplies, wrote petitions to the distant territorial government, and coordinated the women who cooked and tended to the growing camp of settlers. Yet, the railroad's legal representative, Henry Blackwell, was an empire of patience and malice. He knew how to fight the slow war. One gray afternoon, he returned, not with hired guns this time, but with a lone carriage and two official-looking men, the aforementioned federal marshal, and a nervous, well-dressed man, introduced as Judge Alistair Finch. They pulled up to the main gate, which was now guarded by two young ranchers. Blackwell's slick, city-bred confidence was slightly dampened by the sight of 24 armed settlers staring back at him. Eli and Evelyn met them at the fence line. "Mr. Granger," Blackwell said, tipping his hat with a theatrical flourish that seemed out of place in the valley. "We return, as promised. You've been busy, a veritable township. Unfortunately, this does not supersede the authority of the United States government." Judge Finch, pale and uncomfortable, nervously unrolled a large, official-looking scroll. "Mr. Granger, under the auspices of the Eminent Domain Act, and due to documented evidence of violent resistance to lawful commerce, namely the unfortunate incident involving the death of 3 of our employees, this court has issued a temporary injunction on your property, restricting all commercial activity and authorizing a full assessment for immediate acquisition by the Redstone Pacific Railroad." Eli listened, his expression impassive, the familiar coiled tension emanating from him like heat. "Acquisition is theft, Judge, and those men weren't employees. They were murderers with torches." "Irrelevant," Blackwell interjected smoothly. "The law is a weapon, Mr. Granger, and it's sharper than your rifle. You are legally, as of this hour, prohibited from selling livestock, transporting goods, or interfering with any inspection of the property." Evelyn stepped forward, standing shoulder to shoulder with Eli, her small stature somehow magnifying her presence. "And what about the other 23 ranches that are currently using this land as a staging ground? Does your injunction cover them, Mr. Blackwell?" Blackwell's practiced smile wavered. He hadn't expected this level of organized resistance. "We deal with one property owner at a time, Mrs. Granger." "Then, let's talk about that property owner," Evelyn continued, pulling a document from her own skirt pocket, a copy of the deed she'd studied for weeks. "Judge Finch, my husband, Eli Granger, owns this land. But since the date of our marriage, I, Evelyn Pierce Granger, hold a half interest. Now, show me the writ that prohibits me, as an independent property holder, from inviting my friends, the rest of the Free Valley Defense League, to my portion of the land. Show me the law that prevents a wife from helping her husband rebuild after an arson attack." The judge stammered, his eyes darting from the legal document to Evelyn's resolute face. "Well, the injunction is standard. It cites Mr. Granger specifically as the liable party." "Exactly," Evelyn finished, her voice a whip crack. "The only party you seem willing to negotiate with is the one you hope to silence. But I am not silent. This land, my half of it, is currently leased to the Free Valley Defense League for the purposes of defense and community welfare. And by my right as a free woman, I invite every single person standing behind me to come onto my property, to patrol the borders, and to witness this unlawful harassment." A powerful murmur of approval rippled through the gathered settlers. Eli looked down at his wife, his massive hand coming to rest on her shoulder, a gesture that was more than affection. It was a seal of partnership, a silent admission that she was his equal, his anchor, and his strategist. "You see, Mr. Blackwell," Eli said, his voice low and dangerous, "you brought the law. My wife brought the truth. You've got 30 seconds to get your carriage off our land. We have work to do. If you've ever faced down a corporate bully or someone who thinks money trumps justice, tell me how you fought back in the comments. And don't forget to like this story. Blackwell retreated, his defeat veiled by a promise of escalating legal action. The victory was a moral one, not a final one, and the Valley celebrated with a cautious, sober dinner at the Granger house that night. Later, when the settlers had gone, the house was silent save for the crackle of the hearth. Eli sat staring into the fire, the shadows deepening the weary lines on his face. Evelyn joined him, leaning against the arm of his chair. "You were magnificent today," she said softly. "You were the one who broke his law, not me," he replied, his gaze distant. "You should have been a lawyer, Evelyn." "I am what I needed to be," she whispered. "A survivor. You taught me to stand tall, remember? Now, you need to learn to lean." She reached for his bandaged shoulder, her touch light. "What did the war change, Eli? Tell me everything. If we are to fight the world together, there must be no shadows between us." He sighed, a deep rattling exhalation, and the story poured out of him, ragged and raw, years of guilt finally released. "I wasn't always a rancher. I was a cavalry sergeant. The war, the killing. I was good at it, too good. I stopped seeing faces and started seeing targets. I saw things no man should see. We were ordered to burn a farm once, a rebel holdout. Except there was a woman there, and a child. I refused. My commanding officer, he called me a coward. He took the torch. I killed him. Not in battle, but after. I shot him and buried him and kept riding. I left the war a deserter and a murderer. I came here, to the deepest heart of the country, to fight the land instead of men, to punish myself with solitude. When I married my first wife, Sarah, she was gentle. She tried to make me gentle too. But the ghost of that killing, of that burning farm, followed me. The solitude was all I could offer her. She died of a fever, lonely, a year later. I always thought, the land took her because of my sin, because of the things I'd done. You ask why they fear me? Because I'm capable of anything. I've killed in cold blood to save myself, and I've watched the consequence consume the one person I loved. I was afraid you would be next, Evelyn. That the darkness inside me would reach out and touch you too." Evelyn's heart ached, not for fear, but for the profound, tortured isolation he had endured. She climbed onto his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck, letting him feel her warmth, her life. "The darkness is not inside you, Eli. It was the clothes you wore during a terrible time. You killed a man to save an innocent. You deserted a war that had made you a monster to save your own soul. You came here to heal. And Sarah," she paused, her voice shaking slightly with empathy, "she died because of a fever, not your guilt. You didn't kill her. You didn't kill me either. You killed the men who came here to burn us out." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, her gaze soft, yet firm. "You keep calling yourself a soldier, a murderer, a giant. But you're a husband, Eli, and you're the rock this entire valley is standing on. The man who refused to burn the farm is the man I married. That man is the one I believe in, and I refuse to let the darkness win this battle. If you've ever had a past trauma revealed to you and realized that love means accepting the scars, not just the strength, leave a heart emoji in the comments. This kind of vulnerability is the deepest strength of all. Their bond sealed by the truth, the Grangers and the Free Valley Defense League prepared for the next legal strike. But Blackwell and the Redstone Pacific had anticipated their newfound unity. 2 weeks later, the blow came from an unexpected direction. Bo Carter, the grizzled old trapper who had brought Evelyn to the ranch, arrived just before sundown, not with a wagon, but on a lathered horse, his face pale with panic. "Evelyn, Eli, you gotta see this," he gasped, sliding off his horse. He led them to the western edge of the valley, a hidden plateau overlooking the Redstone River. There, under the twilight sky, was a sight that chilled them to the bone. Not a railroad track, but a massive freshly graded scar of earth, wider than any road, running along the riverbank, right through the center of 3 homesteads belonging to some of the League's staunchest members. "The injunction was on your ranch, Eli," Bo whispered, pointing a trembling finger. "But the railroad got a last-minute writ from the territorial capital, a secondary feeder line. They didn't need your land, they needed the water. They're diverting the Redstone to run their steam engines through here, drying out the central ranches. They're stealing the..." Water, not the dirt. Evelyn felt a profound sickness rise in her. Water rights, the oldest, cruelest weapon in the arid West. By choking the water supply of the Central Valley, the railroad would force the surrounding ranches to sell cheap, isolating the Granger property until it, too, was worthless. "They're not using eminent domain," Eli growled, his hands clenching into fists. "They're using extinction. And they're doing it fast," Bo added. "They got men up there now, building the intake dam. They'll have the river diverted by the weekend. We're fighting a clock, not a court." The railroad had executed a brilliant flanking maneuver. They had focused Eli's attention on defending his borders while secretly attacking the vital lifeline of the entire community. That night, the Granger house was tense, the air thick with strategy and desperation. Evelyn laid out the map on the oak table, using stray bullet casings to mark the ranch locations. The dam is the target. If we can destroy the nascent dam and the steam shovels before it's finished, the court process will be delayed for months. Months we can use to solidify our position with the territorial government. We can petition for the doctrine of necessity, that our need for water outweighs their commercial interest. "It's on their property now," Eli warned. "Attacking is a declaration of war. We'll be outlaws. The marshal will come for us with the full power of the federal government." "We are already outlaws, Eli," Evelyn countered, her eyes flashing. "We killed their men. We defied their judge. We have nothing to lose but the land we're standing on. We fight this fire now, or we all burn later. The time for law is over. The time for defense has come." He looked at her, the woman who had replaced his fear with resolve, the gentle soul who had found the spine of a warrior. He had tried to protect her from his darkness. Instead, she had embraced it and used it to light their path. "Then we fight like outlaws," he said, a grim smile finally touching his lips. "We ride at midnight. No torches, no witnesses. We take the dam apart, piece by piece." He turned to the waiting ranch hands, Jedediah Shaw, Bo Carter, and 5 other trusted men. "No killing unless it's to save a life. This is about destroying a machine, not starting a massacre. Remember what you're fighting for." Evelyn didn't try to dissuade him. She simply handed him his rifle, then quietly retrieved her own shotgun. "You're not coming," Eli said, his voice a low, hard command. "I am," she said, meeting his gaze without flinching. "I found the legal flaw, I found the threat, and I will see it through. Besides, who better to stop you from killing than the woman you married to teach you peace? I am your witness, Eli. I am your conscience. I ride with you." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded, a deep, silent acknowledgement of her truth. "Ride behind me, and don't miss, Mrs. Granger." The ride was silent, the valley cloaked in the darkest hour before dawn. They moved like ghosts along the riverbank, the pounding of their horses' hooves muffled by the soft earth. They found the dam site blazing with lanterns. A crew of workers, guarded by a dozen armed men, was frantically trying to finish the wooden intake structure. "Bo, take the east flank. Jedediah, the west. Disable the machinery first. We hit them hard, and we hit them fast. Remember, no killing unless they force it," Eli commanded, his voice barely a whisper. He rode into the camp like a thunderbolt, firing his rifle into the air. The explosion of sound, the sudden chaos, sent the workers scrambling. The armed guards immediately returned fire. Eli was everywhere, a magnificent force, drawing fire but never wasting a shot. He shot the tires of a steam wagon, shattered the headlamps of an engine, and kicked over the wooden supports of the nascent dam. Evelyn, perched behind a thicket of brush, was the watchful eye. She saw a guard raise his rifle on Bo Carter. She didn't hesitate. The shotgun roared, the pellets scattering, narrowly missing the man, but blowing his rifle to splinters. He ran, clutching his hand and screaming. The railroad men, outmatched and outmaneuvered, quickly realized they were facing more than just one madman. They were facing a disciplined, coordinated strike force fighting for their very existence. Within 15 minutes, the camp was a wreckage of broken machinery, scattered tools, and fleeing guards. "Fall back! We're done!" Eli shouted, his voice echoing across the river. As the small force rode away, the last thing they saw was the main support of the dam giving way, the river surging through the breach, reclaiming its bed with a hungry roar. If you've ever had to take a stand and fight for your most essential resources, be it water, freedom, or family, Drop a water emoji in the comments to show your resilience. The sun rose over a triumphant but weary valley. Eli and Evelyn stood on the high ridge, watching the smoke curl from the ruined dam site. The fight was far from over. Blackwell would return with the full force of the law, but they had bought the valley time. "You shot a man's rifle out of his hand," Eli murmured, a note of quiet pride in his voice. "You taught me well," she replied, leaning into his solid, dependable strength. "We are more than just a ranch, Eli. We are an idea now, the idea that common people will not be pushed off their land by greed." Weeks later, the Free Valley Defense League, using the time Eli and Evelyn had bought, hired an honest lawyer in the territorial capital. The lawyer successfully argued the doctrine of necessity in defense of sustained water rights, citing the attempted illegal diversion of the Redstone River. The court, tired of the railroad's endless violence and embarrassed by the chaos, issued a temporary ruling favoring the League. The Redstone Pacific was ordered to cease all operations in the valley until the water rights could be fully adjudicated, a process that would take years, tying up their capital and frustrating their corporate ambitions. The railroad, facing massive delays and mounting legal costs, chose the inevitable, a mediated settlement with the Free Valley Defense League. Henry Blackwell was gone, quietly replaced by a negotiator who offered the League fair market value for the minimal land they required and, more importantly, guaranteed, legally binding water rights for the remaining ranches. The fight had cost them dearly in blood, sweat, and timber, but they had won. One spring morning, months later, Evelyn stood by the fire, watching the last of the embers fade. Eli came up behind her, resting his hand over the small swell of her belly. "I never asked if it was a boy or a girl," he said, his voice full of the quiet hope she had fought so hard to find. "It doesn't matter," she smiled, covering his hand with hers. "It's a Granger. It will be strong, and it will be loved. It will be born into a home we fought for, a free valley." He pressed his forehead to hers, the rough scars of his life finally meeting the soft resilience of hers. "You're the strongest person I've ever known, Evelyn. You saved me from the war I was still fighting. You took the murderer in me and showed me the man who simply wants to protect his own. I learned from you," she whispered. "You taught me that strength isn't about being unafraid. It's about choosing what you're willing to die for. And I choose us. I choose the safety you promised me on the day we met. If you believe that the greatest strength is found in unity and in fighting for what you love, hit the subscribe button and stay with us. Because the story of Evelyn and Eli Granger, the fortress and the firebrand, reminds us that sometimes the wildest land is the human heart, and it takes the fiercest love to tame it. The storm was over, and the era of the Free Valley had truly begun, built on the foundation of a marriage that started with a mistake and ended with a legend. The giant who'd once feared his own power had found peace and purpose in the hands of the woman everyone else had overlooked.